Hi, this is Rabbi Orlofsky, and welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. And whether you're watching with our friends over at Torah Anytime, or wherever you watch or listen to your podcasts, as always, it is a pleasure to have you along for the experience and that you've taken out time from your schedule to listen to anything I have to share. So we're going to start this week with a sponsorship from two dear friends. I was friendly with each one of them separately, and then they got married, which just made it easier for me. I always appreciate that when people that I have friendships with when they're single get married, so that I get to keep things more concentrated. So the episode is sponsored by Tzipora. It used to be Tzipora Shechter. Now Tzipora and Sean Karp. Lilei Nishmas Yisocha Dov ben Mordechai Yosef HaKohen and Tzvi Meir ben Rabbi Yehuda. Now, these names may or may not mean anything to most people, but if I tell you the English names, it might be a little easier for you. Barry Hachdorf and Harold Schechter. My parents, when they reached a certain age and they could not make Pesach anymore, used to go away to the Granite Hotel. And it was run by the Hachdorfs and the Schechters. And a few times they actually brought me in to be a scholar in residence. And it was, they're very, very special people. And when I lived in Far Rockaway, I also had the schus to be able to have a kesher with them. And what can I tell you? You know, good people and good children and good grandchildren. And, they should be zeicha, that it should be an aliyah from the neshamas, that they are being marbet Torah in Klal Yisrael. And I have to say, this is a particularly poignant moment because this is our 200th episode. 200 of these things. And every now and then people will ask me to speak. They say, can you, speak? Do you need any, prep time? And I say, the one thing I've learned from this podcast is that I can speak for 200 hours with no preparation whatsoever. So 200. Oh my gosh, put on your party hats. I would have made a major celebration, but we always have one on the anniversary of the show. So when we come to the fifth year anniversary coming up, so we'll talk about it then. I guess we'll have a little bit of party and break out the bubbly and the party hats and all those kind of great things. But in the meantime, we have more pressing business to deal with, and that is, as you know, if you are of the Ashkenazic tradition. So we begin saying Slichos this Motzai Shabbos. And this year it works out well because we have a full week until Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is, of course, on Shabbos. So you have a week, but you have to have a minimum of 4 days. Now remember, everything's a trade-off. So if you want to have the minimum amount of Slichos, that means you're going to have a 3-day yontif. Because the only way to start on Saturday night and get in 4 days is when Rosh Hashanah comes out on Wednesday night, which means Rosh Hashanah is going to be Thursday, Friday, and go straight into Shabbos. I wouldn't mind doing a few extra mornings of Slichos, not to have a 3-day yontif. I've mentioned this in the past. People know that 3-day yontif is something that the Chazal invented to encourage Aliyah. So I remember the first year that I came, it was that kind of a year. And I had a 3-day Rosh Hashanah. We came originally, the plan was to come for 3 years and try it out and see what we would do. But after I went through a 3-day Rosh Hashanah and I realized it was going to be a 3-day Sukkos and a 3-day Simchas Torah, I said, it's difficult living in Israel away from family and friends. The economy is sometimes challenging. The danger of war and terrorist attacks. But there's nothing that could be worse than 2 more 3-day yontifs. And I made the decision at that time to put my fate in with the Jewish people of Eretz Yisrael. So I couldn't handle another 3-day yontif. But otherwise, it has to be a minimum of 4 days and it has to start on Motzai Shabbos, right? So this year, of course, we have a week of Slichos coming up. And I mentioned if you're of Ashkenazic tradition, because Svardim have been saying Slichos since Rosh Chodesh Elul. And I remember once I was talking to a friend of mine who was of Sephardic descent, and I was complaining about how they can eat the kidneys on Pesach. And he says, yeah, I know, but then we have to say Slichos for a whole month to make up for it. So everything's a trade-off. But what is the concept of starting, number one, on Motzai Shabbos, and number two, of having a minimum of 4 days? These are obviously 2 different requirements. And what is the basis for it? So in order to understand this, we have to figure out what is the concept of Slichos. What is it that we're doing? We are preparing ourselves, obviously, for Yom Adin. And that's why the Aseres Yemei Tshuva and the 4 days before Rosh Hashanah have to be spent saying special Slichos. And the highlight of Slichos is, of course, the Yud Gimel Midos. And we keep coming back to that. Yeah. And repeating it and saying it in different ways. You may not realize it, but if you think about it, Yom Kippur night is just a Slichos service. You know, it's another Slichos, and Ne'ilah is essentially another Slichos service. And that's why, of course, the Yud Gimel Midos are repeated, Hashem, Hashem, Karach, Mechanun, over and over again. When it's repeated so much in Ne'ilah, yeah. So I remember when I grew up in Long Island, we're going to the Young Israel of North Belmore. So they used to sing the Yud Gimel Midos. Hashem, Hashem, Karachum v'chanun. Right? So when you get to Ne'ilah and you have to do it like over and over and over and over again, the tune starts to lose a little of its appeal. So, but the Yud Gimel Midos is an essential moment. And in fact, Slichos is a tefillah. When I say tefillah, I mean like Shacharis Mincha Ma'ariv. I've mentioned this in the past, that we know there are what are called the Sheva Roei Tzon, the 7 shepherds, of the Jewish people. They come on Sukkot in the form of the Ushpizin. Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, Yosef, and Dovid. They are the 7. And we all know that Avram and Yitzchak and Yaakov made tefillahs. Avram was Matakein Shachris, and Yitzchak was Matakein Mincha. This the Gemara says clearly. And the Yaakov was Matakein Ma'ariv. It discusses the aspect of these tefillahs and why these people are related to him. But all the Roei Tzon made it. So Aaron, obviously, he's Ne'ilah. He's the special tefillah of Yom Kippur, because that's the Kohen Gadol's day. Yosef, who's the lashon of Hosafa, of adding on, he made Musaf, the extra. Dovid made Tikkun Chatzos, and Moshe made Slichos. And that's why the Gemara in Brachos describes, where Kodesh Baruch Hu says to him, when the Jewish people have sinned and they want to do tshuva, tell them to do it Keseder Hazeh. And it says that Kodesh Baruch Hu wraps himself in a talis like a shliach tzibor, and he says the Yud Gimel Midos. Yeah. It's very interesting. We don't say the Yud Gimel Midos on Shabbos, and we don't say it on Rosh Hashanah. But we say it when we take out the Torah. So I heard once from Rabbi Shapiro, that's not called the Yud Gimel Midos. Yes, you say Hashem, but that's not the Yud Gimel Midos. The Yud Gimel Midos has to be in the Seder that Moshe Rabbeinu heard it from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'yava Hashem al panav v'yikra Hashem keracham v'chana, right? So you need that in order to make it into the Yud Gimel Midos. Yeah. So it's a tefillah, and that's why it starts with an ashrei and a chatzi kaddish and ends with a kaddish shalom, just like mincha, right? Just like another tefillah. And what's inside is the body of the tefillah itself. So this is a whole separate tefillah that we say. So why was this set up this way? So let's understand. When we sinned, we destroyed the world. We don't appreciate this. Obviously, we don't appreciate it. If we understood the consequences that our actions have, but we don't see it. It's not immediate. When you lived in the Midbar, you knew that you complained and whoosh, fire came down from Shemayim, or the earth opened up and swallowed you, or something else dramatic happened. Snakes came and bit you, There was more of an immediate consequence, but we don't see it. We don't know what we do. We don't realize how every time we do a chait, we're breaking down the fabric of the time-space continuum, the existence as we understand it. So we really don't understand the consequences of what we're doing, because we would act differently if we did. Person sees a button, pushes a button, pulls a lever. They don't understand. You might have just started nuclear war if you push the wrong button and you don't know what you're doing. So we do a chait and we don't understand the cosmic consequences. We're destroying creation. So what we have to do is rebuild creation. We have to fix the world up. And that's why the Al Chaitz are according to the Aleph Beis, because just like the world was created with the Aleph Beis, we destroyed it with our Averas, and therefore we have to rebuild it with the Aleph Beis. And that's the idea of what we're doing when we say Vidoy. And what are we doing with Slichos? So Slichos doing the Aseres Meitshuva, which is a little more intense. Yeah. What are these first Slichos? So we start on Motzai Shabbos. Why? So let's understand what Rosh Hashanah is, because Rosh Hashanah is the beginning of the world. And Kol Hatchala Mevidin. Why is that? Because before I start something, I have to ask myself, should I be doing this or not? Now, very often people don't do that. Very often people just do things mindlessly. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu, needless to say, is very smart. And before you start a project, that's why very often before they do something, they make a preliminary study to see whether or not this is going to be successful. When you want to go to a bank, you want to secure a loan for a business venture, they said, let's see your business plan. Let's see what you're planning on doing. Let's see if it's worthwhile. Let's see if it's going to work. When you commit yourself to something without having thought it through, you end up with World War I. World War I was one of the most dramatic periods of time in world history. We don't put so much focus on it because World War II was so much more dramatic. But the very fact that it's called World War II is just that we understand it's the continuation of World War I. It's just a break in the middle. Most of the same characters in the same places. Today you find people, always make movies, Spider-Man 1, Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man 3, Iron Man 1, Iron Man 2, right? These kind of things. The first movie to ever do that was The Godfather. And it was basically Godfather Part 1 and Godfather Part 2. because they took the novel and they broke it into 2 stories, but it was just meant to be one movie in 2 parts. That's basically what World War I was. When World War I first came by, they didn't call it World War I. That would have been too depressing. They called it the Great War, or the war to end all wars. When World War II came out, they understood that that was just a continuation of World War I. But what happened in World War I is the world was in a delicate balance from the time that they defeated Napoleon. After they defeated Napoleon and they established the Concert of Europe, where they tried to get all of the great powers together to negotiate out issues. Now, of course, it didn't always work. There were battles that took place and wars that took place. Most notably, the Franco-Prussian War in 1870. Before Germany was unified as Germany, it was various city-states, and one of the most powerful ones was Prussia. They also fought in the Napoleonic Wars. And Prussia invaded France, almost captured Paris. They're outside of Paris. And France surrendered. They had to give up territory. And so they were chafing. They were very upset at Germany. And when Prussia became Germany, they were very upset at Germany, French and the Germans. And they were preparing that one day there'd be a rematch. They knew this. But in the meantime, the great powers were all trying to keep balance. So they ended up setting up alliances, the Triple Alliance and the Triple Entente. So it was France and England and, surprisingly, Russia against Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. And each one was planning when there'll be a war, what our battle plan is going to be. How are we going to handle this? So the Germans had what was called the Schefflin Plan, wherein they would make a large pincer movement around the Ardennes and go through Belgium to be able to attack France. And this was the only plan that they really had. And they realized at some point they just don't have enough time. It's too big a sweep. They won't be able to do it fast enough and get everybody there. It's not going to work. But when the war broke out, that was the only plan that they had, so they used it. And that, of course, led to the stalemate that lasted for 4 years, that destroyed an entire generation. Millions of young men lost their lives. And it was devastation that in many ways, Europe never recovered from. And that's why everything was laid in place for a rematch, only now the technology had changed. I remember reading Martin Gilbert, his book on World War I, and he said, it was an impossible war to win with the technology of that time. But when World War II came in, and they had planes, and they had tanks, and they had paratroopers, it changed the entire dynamic. And suddenly everything, you could have a blitzkrieg, where instead of getting, stuck throwing 1 million people against 1 million people at the Battle of the Somme, just to kill each other, a war of attrition mostly, just to see if you can wear out the other side. It was mechanized. It was fast. Things fell in weeks. And it was a whole different thing. But Germany went into this war using a plan that the generals already told them is not going to work. It was the only one they had, which is interesting. I remember seeing Yitzchak Shamir when he was prime minister of Israel. And before they had the Oslo Accords, they were in Madrid working on a peace deal. And he was on Meet the Press, and they were saying to him, are you going to sign this peace deal? So he says, look, the Arabs aren't willing to even say they're not going to destroy us. The Arabs aren't willing to do this. The Arabs aren't willing to do that. How do you sign a peace treaty like that? And finally, they tried this, they tried that, and he had a teretz for everything. He answered it up. And finally they said, so what are you going to do? And he said, the Jewish people are very patient. We've waited hundreds of years, thousands of years for peace. We're not going to sign some ridiculous deal just to get us out of it. Of course, just like Rabin did in the Oslo Accords. But he was like, "What? You can't just say any deal is better than a bad deal. It's not true. Don't sign a bad deal." But, Yitzhak Rabin felt he had no choice, or whatever his considerations were, and he signed a deal that was a terrible deal. Yeah. When President Biden decided to grab and run out of Afghanistan, leaving behind billions of dollars of equipment, leaving behind people, everything just ran out. He said, "Look, you just got to go. You just got to go. Yeah, sometimes you got to just go. Why don't you have a plan? Why don't you plan it out? Okay, you got to go, but first take out all of the equipment, then take out all of the civilians, and then finally bring out the troops. But don't just grab the troops and run, leave everything behind." I just got to go. You just got to go. Oh, we don't have a plan. We don't really know how to implement it, but we got to do something. So, at the end, if you want to do something, you first have to think it through. What am I doing and how am I going to do it? Where's it going to come from? I remember years ago, Eshet Torah, and I'm talking 1982, 83, asked me to give some talks in the yeshiva about, making a kiruv organization. I had, at the time, been running NCSY in Long Island and had basically built it from scratch. And so they gave me a list of topics they wanted to talk to me about. One of them was called professionalism in kiruv. And so I sat down with Rabbi Moshe Shade Zatzal, who I was learning Chavetz Chaim in the afternoons, and to ask him. And he says, "Look, I don't know what that means exactly, but maybe this medrash will help you." And it says that during that week that Moshe Rabbeinu was arguing with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he says, "Look, you want me to take the Jews out of Egypt. How am I going to protect them from the heat? How am I going to protect them from the cold? There are all kinds of different people there. There are nursing women and pregnant women. There's elderly. There's little children. Where am I getting the nuts and the candies for the little children?" And I remember Rabbi Chait, when he wanted to make a point, he would dramatically take off his glasses and he said, "Jews are dying in Egypt, and you're worried about where I'm going to get the nuts and the candies for the children. Because you got to plan it out. You can't just do something. You have to really think it through." And so people who just do things and then afterwards worry about what they're going to do, right? There's that famous little cartoon of a guy who was painting the floor and he's in the corner now with no place to go. And it says, "Plan ahead," which is, of course, brilliant. Yeah, think ahead. How are you going to do this? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to decide whether to create the world. And the creation of the world began on Motzai Shabbos, obviously. Yom Rishon, the first day. Vayi Erev Vayivoka, there was night and there was day, which means the creation of the world began on Saturday night and Sunday, and that was the first day. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to have to decide now, is it worth recreating this world? Now, the entire world is created only for the sake of people, human beings. You understand that. And that's why in the flood, the animals and birds were destroyed. And the question is why? So Rashi brings two answers. One is because they also sinned. They also went against their natural way, gave birth to monsters. The other answer is because God didn't make the world for birds and animals. He made the world for people. And without people, there's no purpose to the world. I learned this word once when I was teaching in Or Sameach, where I said a similar idea, and a guy says, "So Judaism is anthrocentric?" And I said, "Yes, it is," having no idea what the word meant. But luckily, I paid attention during my SAT preparation course. And I know anthro means people. Anthropology, or someone who hates people, is a misanthrope. Yeah. And centric is, of course, that it centers around, as in whether the world is heliocentric or geocentric. Does it go around the earth or around the sun? So anthrocentric means so you basically focusing on people. And I said, yes. Threw him off. I guess he wanted to impress me with a big word. Yeah. Pay attention during high school, boys and girls. That's the message. But, the world, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to create the world, it's going to be for people. It's because he's going to find that there are people who it's worth creating the world for. And that's what we have to present to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, the Mishnah says there are Arba Roshei Shonim, right? And likewise, 4 times a year, the world is judged. The world is judged on Pesach for Tavua, for grain. It is judged on Shavuos for Peres Ha'ilan, fruits of the tree. We are judged on Sukkot for water. Yeah. And on Rosh Hashanah, Kol Boy Olam, Over Lefanav Kibnei Baron. Everybody passes before God like Bnei Maron. The Gemara brings 3 explanations of what that is. But everyone comes before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Brisa goes on to say, therefore, we offer up something that we're being judged with on each one of these holidays. So on Sukkot, we actually pour water on the Mizbeach when we're bringing the Korban in the morning. And the Nisuch HaMayim, we pour the water on the Mizbeach because we're being judged for water, so we offer up water. On Pesach, we bring the Korban Omer, 2 loaves of barley of the new crop, because we're being judged on grain. On Shavuos, we're being judged on fruits of the tree. Therefore, we bring the shtei lechem, the 2 loaves of wheat bread, says the Gemara. But wheat doesn't grow on a tree. He's going according to the view that the Eitz Hadas was wheat and that bread used to grow on the trees in Gan Eden. But today you have to plow it, you have to plant, and you have to fertilize and harvest and thresh and winnow and grind and sift and knead and bake in order to get a piece of bread. In Gan Eden, it was just on the tree. Go over and pull off a loaf of bread. If it was a darkwood tree, it was probably pumpernickel. If it had a hole in the middle, it was probably a bagel tree. You understand? So whatever they grew on the trees. But what about for Rosh Hashanah? Rosh Hashanah, Kol Boy Olam, is going to pass before Kadosh Baruch Hu. So what are we offering up? The reason there has to be a minimum of 4 days is because before you bring a korban, you have to check it for 4 days. Which means what we're going to offer up on Rosh Hashanah, starting on Motzai Shabbos, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to decide whether or not to create this world, is we're going to offer up ourselves. We are the korban. And that's what we are preparing ourselves to do. To bring a korban. And it happens to be a very, very powerful idea, if you think about it. Obviously, Kedat Yitzchak is one of the main concepts that we're dealing with when we talk about Rosh Hashanah, right? And the shofar is an ayil. So remember the ayil that Yitzchak, that was offered up in place of Yitzchak. Yitzchak was ready to give his entire life over to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It was an interesting thing. Why is it called the Kedat Yitzchak? The Torah presents it as a nisayon for Avraham, and not for Yitzchak. That's not how it's presented. But we call it Kedat Yitzchak when it's as if Yitzchak is the one who's getting the credit for this. When you see these depictions, when they draw up pictures, Yitzchak is this little boy and his father is standing over him with a knife. Yitzchak was 37 years old. Avram was 137. Yitzchak probably could have taken him if he had to. You know what I mean? Like, if he didn't want his dad to kill him, he probably could have knocked him over and ran for it. You know? Grab the donkey and go. Leave him behind. But in fact, as Rashi says, they're walking up the mountain, and he says, well, I see the knife, I see the fire. Where's the animal? And Hashem says, you're the Ola. I'm bringing you up. V'yelchu shneim yachtav, it says again. And Yitzchak was like, okay, cool. Now, why do we put the emphasis on Yitzchak? So there's two reasons why. One is, when we think about Nevuah, we imagine there's like this voice, Hashem, Abraham, leave your home, the home where you grew up, and go to the whole. There was no words. Only Moshe Rabbeinu got words. Nobody else got words. There was no voice of Hashem. There was a movie in the 1970s, I think, with Dudley Moore, where he plays Moshe's brother-in-law, like he married a different daughter of Tzipporah, and he happened to also be up on Har Sinai with the sheep, and he hears God talking to Moshe, and he thinks he's talking to him. So he goes down to Egypt to confront Paro. That's ridiculous. It's not a voice over a loudspeaker that anybody could possibly hear. It's just silly. Yeah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving you divine inspiration, and you get a picture. And this is what Hashem says to Moshe and Aaron. Says, you're not afraid to start up with Moshe? Because you're a prophet. You're a prophet. You get a picture. You get an image. You have to try to understand it. But Moshe gets words. That's a whole different thing. He gets it direct. That's why when you read something in the Torah, it's not what happened. It's been edited. Yeah. Simply put, Avram sees these three Arabs coming by, and he bows down to them, and he gives them this whole little speech. It wouldn't have been in Hebrew. Nobody understood Hebrew. They were Arabs. That's what you see that when Yosef gets down to Mitzrayim, Paro doesn't know Lashon HaKodesh, doesn't speak it. It was a language that was known to the Jews, not to everybody else. So he must have been speaking to the Arabs in Arabic. When he spoke to Paro, it was probably in Egyptian. The Torah puts it into the terms that we need to hear and we need to understand. So that when you read about a whole nevuah, take your son, your only son, the son that you love, Yitzchak, and bring him up the mountain and offer him as an offering. Avram didn't get those words. He got a picture and he had to understand. So as they're walking up the mountain and Yitzchak says, where's the Ola? You're the Ola. One second, you mean Hashem said that you should take me up the mountain and kill me? I mean, not in so many words, but you're sure that's what he said? Yeah. Kill you. Take you up the mountain. Now, Yitzchak had to hope that his dad got it right. Because if he, you ever see those little pictures, Lahavdil, where's Waldo? People are searching for Waldo. Avram, you sure you got it right? Take me up the mountain, tie me up and kill me. Yep. Yeah, that's what he wants me to do. So, Akedas Yitzchak, because Yitzchak had to believe that his father got it straight. That's one level. On another level, he says, okay, I'm going to be a Korban. I'm ready to be a Korban. But tie me down because I'm afraid that when I see the knife, I might get scared and flinch. And then the shechita won't be kosher. Akedas Yitzchak is because Yitzchak was so ready to do it, he tied himself down. The Korban akriv lo es nafshi hayechida. What are we going to offer up? Not water, not barley bread or wheat bread. We're going to offer up ourselves. And that's why we have to say Slichos for at least 4 days, like you check a Korban, because we're going to be the Korban. We're going to say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you are the Melech, and I'm ready to give you the life as Yitzchak did on Rosh Hashanah. I'm going to be the Korban. Powerful idea. Yochanan Wasserman was in America when World War II broke out. I learned in Yeshiva Chavetz Chaim, and Rabbi Kanarik, who escaped with the Mir through Russia to Shanghai. So he learned by the big Rosh Yeshivas. And somebody asked him once, why did Rebbe Chanan go back? He says, nobody anticipated the Holocaust. You couldn't see it coming. Who could imagine? There had been pogroms. There had been exiles. We had that during World War I, those kind of situations. But a systematic extermination of the Jewish people didn't see this coming. So he goes back to be with his Talmidim, and they understand they're being taken out to be killed. And he says to his Talmidim, everybody clear your mind and just have the right machshavas, so there shouldn't be any mum in your korban that you're going to become. Because, you can pass a korban with the incorrect thought. That's what pigul is. You have the wrong thought, and even though you did everything right, it's no good. Make sure you have the right thoughts. And there were people who that was their entire focus. I've played this through in my mind many times. I really have. Because I find the experience of the Holocaust to be so mind-blowing, so impossible for me to wrap my head around. I'm pretty sure I wouldn't make it to the train. They'd probably shoot me before I made it to the train. I'm not good in these kind of situations. The strength that these people had is beyond understanding. They put them in the trains, and they're there for days. And they have no food, no water, no sanitary facilities, very little air. And somehow, some of them survived. I mean, the majority survived, but people died on the trains. From the heat, suffocation, starvation. Anyway, when they came out, so they gave everybody a container of water. And then they brought them over to the gas chambers, which people, some of them guessed what they were, and other people didn't know. And this girl was watching this one old man holding his little glass of water. Everybody drank it immediately. They were so thirsty. He held on to it. And they bring them over and they tell everybody, take off all your clothes. And he still didn't drink his water. And they're leading him into the gas chamber. And he takes the water and washes his hands so he can make a bracha al Kiddush Hashem, that he can die with the correct intention. Korban akriv lo es nafshi. You know what we're going to offer up on Rosh Hashanah? Ourselves. As Yitzchak did. Din. It's the Yom HaDin. And in Din, you don't deserve anything. God, you gave me life. You want it back? It's yours. The poignant Gemara with Rabbi Meir and Bruria, where their two sons died Erev Shabbos. It was not enough time to arrange for burial. So she brought them up in the attic. She covered them over. And she lit a candle. She came down. And throughout Shabbos, Rabbi Meir would say, where are the boys? They went to the Beis Medrash. They went here. They went there. And finally, after Havdalah, she says, Rabbi Meir, I have a halachic question. It's okay. Someone give me a pikadon. Pikadon means something to hold in trust. And I have to tell you, I've fallen in love with this pikadon. I don't want to give it back. Can I keep it? So Meir says, Bruria, you're a smart girl. You know you can't do that. belongs to somebody else. You have to give it back. But what if I really, really want it? It doesn't make a difference. So she brings him upstairs and shows him their 2 dead sons and said, Hashem asked for his pikadon back. Because it was only given to us in trust. The neshama that you gave me, you put into me. Yeah. It's only on loan. If Hashem says he wants his life back, he gets it back. Even though we've grown somewhat attached to it. Yeah. But we understand. Yeah. It's not us. And that's what we're going to be doing during Slichos week. For the week before Rosh Hashanah. During the days of creation. The 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6 days of creation. Till we go into Shabbos, which is Rosh Hashanah. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to say, should I create the world for you? And I say, Hashem, I'm yours. Do with me as you will. I belong to you. I give you everything I have. That's what we're going to be saying on Slichos. That's why we're starting it Saturday night, because it has to do with the beginning of creation. And we do it 4 days because we understand that we're the Korban. We're what's going to be offered up. And we want to be as pure as we possibly can. And Mitzvah Hashem, we will use this week well. And we'll be Zoicha to go into Rosh Hashanah and have a ksiva v'chasima taiva for ourselves, our family, and Klal Yisrael. And that brings us to the question and answer part of the program. Anonymous asks, in the past, you mentioned various issues in the chinuch system. I would go so far as to say that it's worse than you made it out to be. What is your view on homeschooling? It's definitely worse than I made it out to be. Well, as you know me, I don't like to say anything negative. I'm such a positive person. I repeat over the words that Rav Moshe said to me, probably not meant for publications. But he should have thought better before telling it to somebody as irresponsible as myself. Olam HaYeshivas de mamash ason. The yeshiva world is an ason. Ason is a disaster, like an earthquake or a flood, a tornado. The mamash ason. I don't know if you can fix it. You'll have to take the whole thing apart and rebuild it. And so, there are serious problems. What do I think about homeschooling? So what are the pluses and what are the minuses? The minus is that there is a value to being socially involved with other kids your age. It's an important thing. Yeah. In the Pesach Krohn tells the story that in the early years of America, there was really only one yeshiva elementary school. It was RJJ. Had a waiting list of like 1,000 kids. It was like impossible to get in. So this woman comes from Europe. The first thing she does is she takes her son to RJJ to sign her up and says, lady, we don't have a spot. We don't have a spot. I said, well, what am I supposed to do with my son? Because I don't know, but we don't have any room here. She said, thank you very much. And she took her son outside and they sat on the steps. And they sat there all day. It was time for lunch. He took out his lunch. Went inside to wash and make a Motzai. Came out, ate his lunch, benched, and they sat there. They were still sitting there the second day. And they said, lady, we told you we don't have any room for you. She goes, I know. And she was sitting there the third day. And they said, lady, but we don't have any room for your son. I know, but I want him at least to see what boys who learn in yeshiva look like. They found the spot. Yeah, determination sometimes pays off, But so there is a value to interaction. On the other hand, you have to really determine where you live and what the school options are that are available to you, because sometimes those are less positive options. I know certain kiruv organizations where they said they used to send their kids to the local day school and they ended up getting turned off from Yiddishkeit. So they would keep them in public school and send them off to Eretz Yisrael. It was more effective, At least in public school, they knew they were in public school, So, but there's definitely a value to that. The second thing is that a school does have the opportunity and sometimes the resources to get really top professional educators. Most parents are not top educators. By the same token, sometimes they don't get the top educators. Yeah. It can sometimes be hit or miss. At one point, J.K. Rowling, who was writing the Harry Potter series, didn't want to give away the ending, but somebody said, why would Professor Dumbledore keep Snape as a teacher if he's such a terrible teacher? So the answer came out at the end of the book, but the answer she gave Bintayim was because it's an education to know that you're not always going to have good teachers. And I've had to tell this to my own children because they have had teachers who were bad teachers. They've had people who were bad people. And they, every now and then they have a sociopath. I mean, mamish a sociopath. Somebody who should not only not be teaching, but they should really be in an institution, in my opinion. I can cite reasons why I came to this conclusion, but okay. So I would tell them, just suck it up and you got to get through the year, but I was able to supplement, what they were doing in their education and things like this, but okay. So there is those advantages. The downside is if the kids in the school are not very nice and the kid gets bullied, or if the teachers are not so qualified, or they insult children, which I can tell you many stories of, or other problems that go on. Can homeschooling be an option? Yes, if you know what you're doing. And not just if you you stay in bed and you let the kid, play in the computer, and say, okay, do a couple of math problems, If you know how to homeschool and you're dedicated to it because it takes a lot of time, it's a commitment of time, then studies have shown that kids who are homeschooled properly are superior to kids who are in an educational system. And I would go a little further because I heard Rabbi Orlofsky say this, and he said, I used to say it in my own name, but then I heard Rav Matisyahu Solomon say it, so I say it in his name. And that is, everything that's artificial has side effects. I'm on a lot of medications. And every box comes with this little booklet of all the things that could go wrong. The first thing I do is throw it away, because if I read it, I wouldn't take any of my medicines. Of course, everything has side effects. So the way the Torah anticipated education was, V'shinanten levanecha, you are going to teach your children. A father has a mitzvah to teach his children. Sternbach tells the story that when he had his first son, he went to the stipler to get a bracha. So the stipler said, who's going to do the milah? And he says, I hope to do it myself. I'm not a trained moil, but I have a moil who'll set it off for me and I'll do the actual cut. So he says to him, Ef shal yidei shliach, you can appoint a shliach, a representative to do it for you, like most people do. He says, yeah, but the general principle is it's always better to do something yourself than to give it over to a shaliach. And the stipler looked at me and said, remember that when it comes to his chinuch. Same thing when it comes to education. Anyone who thinks you're going to send your kid off to a school, even if it's a good school, and that's going to absolve you of your obligation, are going to find out that you are sorely mistaken. My wife, at one of the many parent-teachers meetings that she's gone to, and she goes to most of them because we have 8 daughters and 1 son. So I would go to the boys. I said, you go to the girls, I'll go to the boys. Anyway, sometimes a teacher would say, I could tell that your daughter comes from a very special home. And my wife would say, well, it's a very special school. And she's like, no, I know the school. It has to be the home. And that's what we do. My children know they can ask me anything. Now, I happen to be uniquely poised to be able to answer questions because I do that for a living. Not all parents can, but I supplement whatever they're doing. Every one of my girls in 8th grade, they know that they get this final test on Vayikra and Sav. It's all of Korbanos. And most people don't really know it. And they sat through class, and I don't know how much of it they absorbed. So before the test, I would sit down with each one of my daughters, and we would chaza over what's the Mizbeach, what's the Mishkan, where does everything go, what different korbanos are there, what are the avodas, where does things go, and go over all of the details and basically give them a primer on Kodshim. Not everyone can do that, but Baruch Hashem, I can. And so, we would go over the things that they were learning and try to supplement it as much as possible. So if all things being equal, if you could do a good job at homeschooling, I think it's a wonderful thing. Just make sure to introduce the social aspect. Okay, by Anonymous, why on Yom Kippur is there almost no time to learn, especially in yeshivas that have a 15-minute break during the day? Isn't there a mitzvah higisa bo yom v'layla? Yes, there's a mitzvah higisa bo yom v'layla. But that doesn't mean that I have to be learning 24 hours a day, right? Obviously, you're allowed to go to work, as Rabbi Shmuel says, v'yasafta diganecha. So you don't have to learn 24 hours a day, unless you're Rishon B'Yochai v'chaverev. But otherwise, you have other things you have to do during the day. I asked this once to Reb Moshe Shapiro. They have this thing in Eretz Yisrael called Yeshivas Mordechai HaBilshan, I think it's called, or Mordechai Vest. I think it's Mordechai HaBilshan, where they make like Avos Umanim in the middle of Purim. I don't know where you find the time, but okay. I should correct that. That's because there are people who have a Purim where basically they have a Shabbos Suda, and somebody puts on a funny hat, and maybe they put out a little bottle of wine. Everybody has a little revius, and that's about it. My house is a raucous affair on Purim. And especially when I used to teach, and I'd have my Talmidim and seminary girls, and people would be coming over, etc. And I would have to run out in the middle and go to Rabbi Moshe Shapiro's tish, to spend some time over there and come back in the Shalach Monos. And it's how you fit all these things in. I asked Rabbi Moshe when I was at his Suda what he thought of it, and he said, "Zelo mitzvat hayom." He says, in Yerushalayim, there's a mitzvah to learn Hilchos Pesach because it's 30 days before Pesach. Avazeh chelik min hasuda, he said. He says, but to be learning during the day, that's not the mitzvahs hayom. Same thing with Yom Kippur. The mitzvah of Yom Kippur is tefillah and vidoy. So we say things in the morning to be Yotzei Talmud Torah. We say things by Mincha to be Yotzei the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. And of course, there are people who have the minhag to learn Mishnayos Yuma. Yeah. So of course, there are things that we learn, but that's not the mitzvah of the day. The mitzvah of the day is tshuva, vidoy, the fasting. That's what you're supposed to be focusing on. Taking this opportunity to change who you are. Okay, well, that's it for this week. If you want to find out more about the show, you can go to my website, RabbiOrlofsky.com. You can send a message. You can leave a comment. You can download the theme song. You can sign up for one of our online shiurim, Mesilas Yesharim, Daf Yomi, and the Tefillah series. You can... soon you can sponsor an episode, and soon you're going to have the option to sponsor our Parsha 5 minutes that is going to be starting Mirz Hashem Parshas Bereshis, and then the sponsorship will be more affordable for people who can't afford to sponsor a whole episode, and you'll have opportunity for multiple sponsorships. So to get out a little thought on the parsha and, a little idea. And I hope to throw in a couple of questions that people can ask at the Shabbos table. But that's going to be coming up soon. You'll have that option. And that's it for now. Until next time, this is Rabbi Orlofsky, and this has been the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.
It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Knowledge and wisdom will help you grow. Lots of fun in every episode. And we don't have to rhyme. No, we don't. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show on RabbiOrlofsky.com. Torah, anytime, YouTube and more. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Till next time, till we meet again. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.